After cancer, have you ever caught yourself thinking something like this? Well, at least mine wasn't as bad as theirs. Or maybe just the opposite. They're over there complaining, and what I had was way worse. Or maybe you've thought, why does so and so seem to be doing so well when I'm still struggling? Maybe you've compared your treatment, your scars, your fatigue, your fear. Maybe you've looked at someone else's cancer story and thought quietly to yourself, am I doing this wrong? Cancer comparing mostly happens quietly. It happens in waiting rooms, in support groups, in online forums, in hospital hallways, and sometimes in the silence of the car ride home after an appointment. But most often, it happens inside our own heads. Here's why these conversations are important. When this one-upsmanship and hierarchies of suffering creep into a community, no one wins. So let's examine why cancer comparing experiences are so common and how to replace the unhealthy comparing with understanding and compassion. This is the After Cancer Podcast. I'm your host, oncology physical therapist, Dr. Leslie Waltke. For more than 3 decades, I've walked alongside people living with and beyond cancer. Whether you are a survivor, a caregiver, or part of a clinical team who cares for them, I'm glad you're here. Because life after a cancer diagnosis can feel uncharted and confusing, even when you have a great medical team. In this podcast, evidence, empathy, and the real human experience come together to help you navigate the physical, emotional, and practical realities of cancer and the life that comes after. This is the After Cancer Podcast, rooted in medicine, spoken in human. Welcome to episode 3, the cancer comparing. Why we do it and why it doesn't always help. Today we're going to talk about why cancer comparing is so common, why it can feel so powerful, yet why it too can pull us away from the thing we need most during and after cancer: compassion. Compassion for others and compassion for yourselves. Today we're talking about something that almost every person touched by cancer experiences, but very few people say out loud: cancer comparing. Now, you probably didn't expect that surviving cancer might sometimes feel like being pulled into a strange, silent contest. A contest no one announced. A contest no one agreed to. And yet somehow it's there. An invisible ranking system where people quietly measure whose cancer was harder, whose treatment was worse, whose story sounds more legitimate. Sometimes the comparison happens out loud. Someone says something like, oh, you only needed surgery? I had chemo and radiation. Or at least yours wasn't stage 4. Other times it's more subtle. A quiet moment when you hear someone describe their experience and you suddenly feel guilty. Guilty that your treatment was shorter. Guilty that your side effects weren't as severe. Guilty that maybe you feel more shaken than you think you're supposed to be. Or the reverse can happen. You hear someone talk about their recovery and you feel resentment creeping in. Why do they seem fine when you're still exhausted? Why are they running marathons while you're struggling to get through the day? And sometimes the comparison happens entirely inside your own mind. You might catch yourself thinking, I shouldn't feel this bad, or other people had it worse, or I don't even know if I deserve to call myself a survivor. If any of this sounds familiar, you are far from alone. Cancer comparing is incredibly common, and it's deeply human. Human beings are wired to compare. Psychologists call this social comparison. Our brains look for reference points to understand the world around us. We compare our jobs, our houses, our income, our achievements, and when something frightening or uncertain happens, like a cancer diagnosis, our brain may search even harder for context. We want to know where we stand. We want to know if what we're feeling is normal. We want to know if our pain makes sense. Comparison becomes our brain's attempt to answer questions like, how serious was this? Did I overreact? Was what I went through enough to matter? Yet here's the problem. Cancer is one of the few human experiences where comparison almost always breaks down. Because cancer is not a standardized experience. It behaves more like a fingerprint than a formula. Every cancer is different. Different biology, different treatments, different bodies responding in different ways, different support systems, different life circumstances. Back in episode 1, I opened this entire podcast series with this. We often hear we're all in the same boat. But in reality, when it comes to cancer, we're not. Yes, we're all human. Yes, all cancers are a bunch of rogue, rapidly dividing cells. But the people facing those cells, they're in different boats, caught in different storms, with different captains, with different crews, and awfully wildly different resources and expectations. So even two people with the same cancer type, the same stage, and the same treatment plan can have wildly different experiences. I have treated thousands of cancer survivors over my career, and one of the most important things I've learned is this. There is a huge variation in the range of a typical cancer recovery. Some people recover quickly. Yes, that's typical. Some people struggle for years. Yes, that too is typical. Again, the range of typical is a huge bell curve. Also, some people look strong on the outside but are barely holding it together emotionally. Some people look fragile and uncertain but are incredibly resilient internally. And from the outside, you often can't tell the difference. Yet despite knowing all of that, comparison still creeps in. Now let's talk about some of the most common forms cancer comparing can take. One of the most common is what is called the at least comparison. You've probably heard this before. Well, at least it wasn't chemo. At least they caught it early. At least yours wasn't metastatic. Sometimes people say these things because they are trying to comfort you. They're trying to help you see the bright side. But what often happens instead is that your experience gets minimized. It sends an unspoken message that you shouldn't feel as scared, sad, or shaken as you do. And sometimes we internalize those messages ourselves. We push ourselves to be grateful. We tell ourselves we shouldn't complain. We tell ourselves other people had it worse. But pain is not a competition, and minimizing your experience doesn't make you stronger. It just makes you quieter and makes you smaller. So yes, you are allowed to acknowledge the difficulty of your own experience without ranking it against someone else's. Another common comparison shows up when survivors look at someone else and wonder why they seem to be doing better. Maybe you see someone who had the same cancer as you did, and they're back at work, they're traveling, they're posting photos of hikes and races and celebrations. And meanwhile, you might still be exhausted, still dealing with pain, still trying to rebuild your energy. And your brain starts asking, why am I still struggling? Why can't I just move on? But here's something else we don't always see. Recovery timelines vary enormously. And especially in the age of social media, we are often seeing the highlight reel. We see the smiling photos. We see the victories. What we don't see are the quiet nights of anxiety, the fatigue that hits like a wall, the terror before a follow-up scan, the moments when someone else is sitting in their car outside a doctor's office taking a deep breath so they don't throw up before going inside. So two things can be true at the same time. Someone else can be doing well, and you can still be struggling. And neither experience cancels the other one out. Another powerful form of cancer comparing is survivor guilt. This often shows up when someone else's cancer progresses or when someone dies. You may find yourself thinking, why them and not me? Why did I get another year when they didn't? Quick side note here: living with uncertainty is hard enough on its own, yet it becomes much more complicated when people around you die of the same disease you have. So, in episode 6, we'll talk about coping with living when others don't. All right, so back to this survivor guilt thing. You may also feel guilty for celebrating milestones, guilty for laughing, guilty for planning the future. But guilt is not the price of survival. Honoring someone else's life does not require diminishing your own. And moving forward with your life is not betrayal. It is the continuation of life. Cancer comparing also has another hidden cost. It can quietly chip away at self-compassion. When we measure our experience against someone else's, we often minimize our own pain. We tell ourselves we shouldn't feel scared, we shouldn't feel sad, we shouldn't feel angry. But those feelings don't just disappear. They simply go underground. And when pain goes underground, it often turns into shame. Shame that we are not handling this well enough. Shame that we are not grateful enough. Shame that we are not strong enough. Shame is one of the most powerful barriers to healing. Because when we feel ashamed, we stop speaking honestly. We stop asking for help. We stop trusting our own experience. Cancer comparing can also isolate survivors from each other. Instead of connection, we start building invisible hierarchies. Who had it worst? Who had the hardest treatment? Who deserves the most empathy? But there is no prize for suffering the most. There is no medal for having the scariest diagnosis. There is no gold trophy for enduring the longest treatment. Every cancer experience requires courage. Every single one. Whether your treatment lasted 2 weeks or 2 years, whether your cancer was caught early or discovered late, whether you had surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, or some combination of all three. Every cancer diagnosis disrupts your sense of safety in your own body. Every diagnosis asks you to walk through uncertainty. And that alone is profoundly difficult. So then what can we do when we notice ourselves slipping into comparison? Well, the first step is simply awareness. Comparison often happens automatically. It's human. Your brain may start ranking experiences before you even realize it. So if you notice it happening, take a breath. This is not a moral failure. It is simply a human brain trying to make sense of something completely overwhelming. Also, instead of judging the comparison, get curious. Ask yourself, what am I actually needing at this moment? Am I looking for reassurance? Am I looking for belonging? Am I afraid my experience won't be understood? Often, comparison is simply a signal that we are looking for validation. We want to know that our pain counts. We want to know that our fear was justified. We want to know that if our type of cancer comes with a stigma, that what we went through mattered. And here is the truth. Your suffering is valid. Your fear is real. Your experience does not have to be the most extreme to deserve compassion. Another helpful shift is to move from comparison to witnessing. Instead of measuring someone else's story against your own, simply honor it. You can say, "That sounds really hard," or "I'm so sorry that you had to go through that." And then allow your own experience to exist alongside it without ranking one above the other. Hard is hard. There is no universal scale that can measure the terror of hearing the word cancer. There is no scale that can measure the fear of a biopsy, or the moment you realize you no longer fully trust your own body. Sometimes cancer comparing doesn't come from inside your own mind. Sometimes it comes from other people. A friend might say, "At least yours was caught early." A fellow survivor might say, "Well, you didn't have chemo, so you were lucky." Even medical professionals sometimes unintentionally minimize what someone has been through. And when that happens, it can sting really deeply. It can feel like someone is erasing your experience. If you find yourself on the receiving end of that kind of comparison, It's okay to protect your well being. You can acknowledge your feelings. You can say something simple like, I know you're trying to help, but that still really felt hard for me. Or say something like, I'd rather not compare experiences. You are not obligated to justify your pain. You are not obligated to prove that what you went through was difficult enough. Your story matters, even when other people don't fully understand it. And at the end of the day, cancer communities are stronger when they move away from comparison and toward compassion. Instead of saying, at least, we can say, I hear you. Instead of ranking stories, we can witness them. Instead of measuring suffering, we can make space for it. Because every person who walks through cancer is carrying something heavy. And none of us benefit from pretending that only the worst experiences deserve empathy. Before we close this episode, here are your reflection prompt questions you might sit with this week. Number 1, have you ever noticed yourself comparing your cancer experience to someone else's? How did those comparisons make you feel stronger or smaller? What might change if you allowed your story to simply be your own? And number 2, what does your body need today? Not someone else's body, but yours. That's a good question. I like that one. If this episode resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone else navigating cancer. These conversations matter, and the more we openly talk about the realities of survivorship, the less alone people feel. Next up on the After Cancer podcast in episode 4, we are going to talk about something many survivors experience, but very few are warned about: living with a hypervigilant body. After cancer, your nervous system can become extremely alert. You're scanning for danger constantly. Every ache, every cough, every strange sensation. Your brain asks, is this the cancer? Has it come back? Even when you know your scans are clear. This hyper-awareness is not weakness. It is your nervous system doing exactly what it was designed to do after a threat. But when that alarm system stays switched on for too long, it can make everyday life exhausting. Episode 4 will unpack why this happens and how survivors can slowly teach their bodies to feel safe again. And also, before we go, a quick shout out to ABCD, After Breast Cancer Diagnosis. ABCD provides free, virtual, personalized emotional support by matching anyone impacted by breast cancer with a trained volunteer mentor who has a similar lived experience. Learn more about getting support or becoming a mentor at abcdbreastcancersupport.org. I'm oncology physical therapist, Dr. Leslie Waltke. Thank you for joining me. You'll find the resources and the link to our email list to get future episodes emailed directly to you in the show notes. As always, exercise like your life depends on it, because it does. And remember, your cancer experience is valid and doesn't have to look like anyone else's. You are not alone, and you belong here. Peace out. Let's talk again soon.